Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every single day. Use the promo code MAGICMICS to get 5% off your next order and support the show. Make sure we stick around at CoolStuffInc.com. Go check it out today. We are also sponsored by our co-sponsor, Mana Traders, the best tool to enhance your Magic Online experience. Use the code MAGICMICS_YTM for 10% off your next subscription, and tell them that we sent you and we appreciate it. My name is Evan Irwin. We get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Power Dragon.
What's up, everybody? This is going to be an interesting week to see what we all selected here, because I don't have a clue.
It's neat. Ruben Bressler.
Yeah, I mean, the top 10s for these, like, Universes Beyond products are weird to see what we value, even, like, what's important to us. So, yeah, I'm excited to see your guys' lists.
I think what's important is you should scooch to your right, because you're a little cut off.
My right?
Your right, correct.
This way.
Yes. Good.
But to your point, Ruben, like, when we're looking at a regular set, it's very easy to go, like, okay, we need, like, efficient casting costs, we need removal, we need whatever. But, like, when we're looking at these Universes Beyonds, especially when they're for commander sets type stuff,
right?
Like, it's a little bit different. It's like, what do we each prefer? What do our groups look like that we value? So I think that's going to give us a pretty interesting selection of the 10 here.
There you go. So we also begin with our choice of the top comment from our last top 10 in the segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Murders at Karlov Manor cards. Ruben?
Well, there was a long time, speaking of what you value, in a comment, you know, sometimes you value passion, sometimes you value facts and diligence. For a long time, I valued, like, the length with which you argued, and we're going back to that today. We had a really long, but, like, detailed and every sentence means something comment from Hawkeye137137, who writes, as a player who started the game at Mirrodin Block and loved artifacts since then, Forensic Gadgeteer is the card I'm most excited for from Murders at Karlov Manor. At first sight, he may look like a Vidalcan Archmage, which you might need to pay mana to draw your cards, but he is actually a better Archmage since it produces artifacts. Artifacts which you can sack to draw if you really need it. But artifacts which you can also use for all sorts of other purposes in an artifact deck. Sack them to Krark-Clan Ironworks, or tap them to Urza for mana, animate them with Rise and Shine, use as tutor fodder for Kodoltha Forgemaster, or untap stuff with Clock of Omens. And his cost reduction ability is nothing to sneeze at either, with its potential changing from sacrificing clues cheaper to going infinite with Basalt Monolith. Possibilities are only limited to what you decide to pair him with, and thanks to Magic's overgrowing card pool, it will only get better.
Forensic Gadgeteer is a rare from Murders at Karlov Manor. It's a blue and 2 generic mana for a 2/3 rare Voldalken Artificer Detective. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, Investigate, which means you make a clue token, and activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 generic mana less to activate. This effect can reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1.
You know, I can respect that argument. I mean, at least for niche uses, right? I don't think it's going to be dominant anywhere. I think we're ever going to see decks where everybody's got to play it. But,
right,
you know, there are some combo potentials and some other things going on there that's fair. That's fair.
Well, yeah. Here's where this was the card I identified from this set that goes in the Vintage Cube the fastest. Because the Vintage Cube for Magic Online really likes to go infinite with Basalt Monolith. Like Zerda is in the Vintage Cube, for example. And it really likes things that make artifact tokens, like Chrome Host Seed Shark, Saheeli, things like that. So this does both in one decently sized creature package that has 3 toughness, so it's easy to interact with. So this was the easiest slam dunk inclusion in the Vintage Cube when I saw this set.
Very nice. All right. Well, thanks to Hawkeye137137. We really appreciate you being part of the show. Stay tuned for our top 10 list and let us know what your choice of your honorable mention is and may be. All right. So let's go ahead and get started here with our top 10 Fallout cards. It's Fallout time. And you know, just I'm having a great time with the Universes Beyond stuff. I think we're really hitting this stride. I think we clearly hit one with Lord of the Rings, but you know what I mean? In terms of, like, this is normal. This isn't some
Yeah.
weird
Yeah.
out there thing. This is a normal thing where we're going to talk about magic cards in an entirely different universe and how they apply the mechanics and the the style and the color wheel and all that stuff. And of all the cards and all the set, and for me, I'm only talking about new cards for what it's worth. But of all the cards, I chose the same card as somebody else. Who is the same
It was
number 10?
me.
It was you. Of all the cards, I have no other hires.
At number 10?
I have no other sames.
At number 10.
At
Wow.
number 10. And I was explaining how I love the simplicity. I like when it's just beautiful.
Yep.
And it's clear. And you give me 5 words. You give me 5 words for a magic card. And I'm just like, mwah. And then number 10 is Atomize. Power Dragon, tell them what it does.
Yeah, it's 2 colorless, green, black for an instant. Destroy target non-land permanent and proliferate. That's it. That's all it does. It's an
5
instant. It's awesome. And it just fits a lot of different decks, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
there's a bunch of different token types, even within just this Universes Beyond set, right? Not counting if you're playing +1/+1 tokens or poison or anything else. It fits all those different deck types. And it's an instant speed removal for damn near everything. So, yeah, easy made my list.
Yeah. I mean, pretty easy auto include for any sort of like a Traxa deck, for example. I think would definitely want to have this. The new Rad counter commanders from the new set are obviously going to be interested in proliferating, but there's a bunch of +1/+1 counters, things like shield counters, all of that kind of stuff at instant speed. Also, proliferating at instant speed is no joke. So that is also a tick in this thing's favor.
Oh, yeah. This card is dope, and it's just such a beautiful, clean design. And I threw it in here at number 10. I had no idea that of all the cards, me and Power Dragon were right there on the same level. So, Ruben, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is from the same deck, the Sultai Rads deck. And my card is one of the commanders for that deck. And I chose it not for any power level reasons, not for any, efficiency reasons, but because there's a big fan base out there of this character in popular culture. You know who you are. This is the Wise Mothman. The Wise Mothman is a generic, a black and a green for a 3/3 flying legendary creature insect mutant with flying. Whenever the Wise Mothman enters the battlefield or attacks, each player gets a rad counter. Whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures, where X is the number of non-land cards milled in this way. So let's quickly talk about what rad counters do. A rad counter is a counter that goes on a player, much like an infect counter, that says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, if you have any rad counters, you mill that many cards. For each non-land card milled this way, you lose 1 life and a rad counter. So you lose the rad counter when you mill a non-land card in this way. So your radiation goes down, I guess, is the flavor here. But it's also a milling mechanic. It can also theoretically be a self-milling mechanic. So, and in this case, it's both. And the Wise Mothman being a flyer that gets a benefit from these radiation counters, these rad counters, is a huge deal. But mostly the Mothman's on this list for being for his sexiness and for the internet being a thing.
For his sexiness, he says. Well, I know it's a sweet commander that does weird stuff with rad counters, trying to wrap your head around exactly how that works. And when they mill a non-land card, this other thing triggers, while this thing also triggers losing them life and stuff. And there's plenty of other cards that trigger off it as well. Is a super neat mechanic. I think they nailed that really nicely there. And ultimately, I think if there's a deck I'd want to play, I might want to just start with this one.
Yeah.
And I'll say, this is probably the most definitive artwork in the set, too. I mean, this is one of the few times you look at a card and go this doesn't look like a normal Magic card. There's something going on here.
Yeah, actually, both of the arts kind of do that. The
very creepy.
The special treatment, the Pip-Boy special treatment's also kind of wild.
Very nice. All right, so moving on here to number 9. My pick for number 9 was similar in some ways to Atomize, but it wasn't quite as clean. But I did thought it was kind of a little bit more rad, so that's why which kind of gave me the way to pick it over number 10. And it doesn't have anything to do with rad counters. Doesn't matter. Point is that it has something to do with mana drain, because I know mana drain. This ain't no mana drain, but it's not the craziest thing in the world. It's called Electro Siphon. Electro Siphon is a red and 2 blue mana for a rare instant that says counter target spell. You get an amount of energy counters equal to its mana value. And like Wizards is playing with energy here, and Wizards is playing with energy in Modern Horizons 3. And let me tell you, they just have to do that thing where they go like, oops, all energy, and then there's trouble. All right, that's all I'm saying. And it's cards like this that can really, get your energy going into high gear. And I think it's a cool idea. And I love the simplicity of the spell. Even if it isn't 5 words, it's still super cool.
Yeah, simplicity works on this one, though. I mean, it's just a counter spell with upside, right? We have different variations of that, obviously. But in this case, it's kind of one of the few ways to, like, leave mana up and still generate energy, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is actually really cool. I kind of like this card.
Yeah, this was very close to my list. I saw this card and was like, that's a lot of value for the deck that wants it.
I'm telling you, man, the energy counters, I don't know if they've got it like figured out, X to Y value versus mana value versus, you know what I'm saying? Like effect versus energy to make it happen. I don't know, but if they get it wrong, you're going to start looking at cards like this for real.
We haven't seen a lot of energy, right? It's been around twice now, I guess.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the third time, technically, we're even seeing cards that reference energy. So I think there's still a lot of space to explore there. It's only a matter of time before something goes crazy. But in the meantime, we'll get a lot of cool designs.
It was a little broken. It was a little broken. Not a lot of broken, just enough. Just a Marvel broken, just a Aetherworks Marvel. Oopsie daisy.
That was like the one, though.
Yeah, and that wasn't even an energy deck, right? Like the Sultai energy deck with Glintsleeve Siphoner was really the energy deck,
and then
it didn't want
they banned
Marvel.
cards of that too,
for sure.
Like,
I agree,
proactively even, which was kind of insane. Ruben, what's number 9?
So for my number 9, we have seen this effect on a card, but not really with another secondary effect. We've seen small reanimation in mono white. Small creature reanimation in mono white, but we haven't seen it attached to a permanent buff. And that's what we get with pre-war formal wear. Pre-war formal wear is 2 generic and a white for an artifact equipment that equips for 3. But when pre-war formal wear enters the battlefield, return target creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield and attach pre-war formal wear to it, and equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance. So this is pretty darn good, for example, with a Flicker Wisp, maybe, in Death and Taxes. This is pretty good with pretty much anything in like those sort of Maverick-y kind of shells, to get a rebuy on a Knight of the Reliquary or some other small creature.
Yeah, a lot of decks that will play this already have small creatures that you're just trying to stack a bunch of parts onto. So if any of those have been destroyed, you just get them back and you're right back to cooking all over again, right? This is actually a really good card for the decks that want it. Now, how many of those decks exist? I don't know, but we're making more of them all the time that want some amount of equipment or artifacts and or enchantments attached to a creature. So this is going to find a home in quite a few things, I imagine. This probably will be $5, $6, $7 for a very long time.
Yeah, it's incredible how like Wizards has this is one of those effects. This is one of those things that they've really kind of honed in on and started making a bunch of iterations on it. I mean, Helping Hand from LCI was only 1 mana to return a creature mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. There was your downside. Return Triumphant, that was in Wilds of Eldraine, did it but gave it a Young Hero roll, which was pretty rad for 2 mana. The same thing here for 3 mana to give an equipment attached to it. Call Surprise Witness was 2 mana from MKM. So like, and even Battle of Hoover Dam, which is in this set, you get to do it every single upkeep. You just have to put a finality counter on the creature that you do it to. So as we were speaking earlier in the pre-show about how like they were pushing, effects downward in the mana cost. Well, that's also creatures downward in the mana cost and higher up in the ability and the, enters the battlefield abilities and so on, or the enters abilities, if you will. But either way, I think this card is super sweet. Definitely was on my short list because just the value is, they're pushing it, man. That's all I'm saying. They're pushing it.
I also like the idea of, like, if you do lose the thing that you've been working to build up, you don't feel completely wrecked if you have this card. It's just like, okay, cool. I can at least jumpstart the thing all over again. Instead of like, okay, I got to find a way to get it or draw into another one or whatever. Like, this is just a good, useful all-around card. Even better if you do have ways to blink this or whatever and get the ability multiple times or whatever.
And think about how well it works with rad counters, right? Like, it feeds into itself, which is really exciting. Power Dragon, what's number 9?
We talked about this previously, but Grim Reaper Sprint. This is a 5-mana aura, and it can be 3 less if you had a creature die that turn, but you enchant a creature, and then when it enters the battlefield, if it's your main phase, you have an extra combat phase coming up. And the creature gets +2/+2 in haste just as a bonus. For no good reason, just does. Like, on top of everything else. And the crazy part about this card is, you're probably going to be able to play this for 2, like, all the time. Because you can literally just run into combat, let a couple things die, and whatever's left, you're like, great. Something's going to be an extra +2/+2, and we're going to do this all over again. So, yeah, this is just a cool card, an interesting design. And I have a feeling I'm going to lose to this card a few times somewhere along the way because I'm just going to forget it exists. But, yeah, just a really sweet design.
Yeah, this card is already starting to kind of take off in price, as it were, and like just to play it and like disperse it back to your hand and then just play it again. Like, these things are things that return enchantments to your hand with costs or effects or whatever. Like, there's a real possibility they just Grim Reaper sprint you to death in like one turn. Just like do it, get you, and do it and get you, and do it and kill you.
Yeah, I want to talk about. This I think probably goes best in a deck that can trigger it reliably to cost 2 mana. So decks that have aristocrats style sacrifice outlets. However, I do also want to point out 2 Kamigawa Neon Dynasty commanders that absolutely are going to fall in love with this card. Shishiro and Ishin. Shishiro is the 4/4 for 4 that cares about modified creatures. And that's a modified creature that you're putting this on and getting another combat step. And this card cares about all of that. And Ishin cares about triggered abilities when you attack. So if you put this on an Ishin, you actually trigger the effect twice. So both of those cards are going to want to play this card pretty reliably.
Yeah, this card is just rad. I love what it does. I think it's very powerful for what it does. But, it's also one of those cards that, like, you kind of have to have played Magic for a minute to know how good it is, I think if you just saw, like, well, you get to attack again, who cares? Like, no, you get to attack again, and you will destroy your opponent because that happens. Let's move on here to number 8. Ruben, what's your number 8?
My number 8, I'm going to take a break for, and we'll see it later.
Ooh, okay. Power Dragon, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is also higher on somebody's list.
Whoa, y'all got hires. I got choices, all right? And I think this card is super rad and kind of scary in a variety of ways. Obviously, it looks freaky and weird when there's something trying to come and get you. But when something's trying to get you like a feral ghoul, it's going to leave a mark.
Yeah.
It's going to come and leave a mark. It's a black and 2 generic mana for a 2/2 rare zombie mutant with menace, because of course it's hard to block. Whenever another creature you control dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever it dies, each opponent gets a number of rad counters equal to its power. So if something else dies, which we already talked about the aristocracy sacrificing stuff deck, Feral Ghoul gets giant. There's no limit on that. It'll say once per turn, put a counter on it. Whenever another creature you control dies, when it doesn't say non-token, you know what I'm saying? Anything that dies, the ghoul gets scary. You sack the ghoul. Everybody gets 1,000,000 rad counters, and Robert's your father's brother. It's great.
There's a bunch of stuff in this set that have sentences that are uncapped that say when a thing happens, do another thing, and they're all terrifying. Like, I feel like there's a higher percentage of cards in this set where I go, that's an innocuous card, but that sentence could be broken, and I feel like fairly easily. And Feral Ghoul has one of those, but has 2 abilities that are incredibly relevant to the game. Plus menace.
I kind of feel the same way. Like, you read this card and go, okay, what's our ceiling? Right? That's literally what you start thinking about. It's like, how many things can I sacrifice? Can I give somebody, like, 8 or 10 rad tokens at one time? Like, is this possible? Like, this is the type of card I almost wish there was something we could do with it and even say, like, modern or something or whatever, because I think there's some cool options available. But it's a neat card design overall, truthfully. I think this can fit a bunch of different decks, and it's just fun. I don't think it's busted in the way that you're upset about it if you lose to it. Like, you have to do a lot of really cool things to really get this to pop off.
There you go. So let's move on here to number 7. Ruben, what you got?
Hey, there's a cycle in this set, everybody, and it's the bobbleheads, and I love them so much, and they make me so happy, and they're all kind of good, except for the luck bobblehead, which you need the other bobbleheads to use effectively. But, like, who cares, man? The bobbleheads are great, and they all have really cool abilities, and I was, like, stuck between 3 of them to put on my list, but I ended up going with Endurance bobblehead as the one that I wanted to talk about here. Endurance bobblehead is a 3 generic mana artifact bobblehead that taps for 1 mana of any color, like all of the bobbleheads do. And like all of the bobbleheads, it has an activated ability that activates for 3 generic and tap. This one says up to X target creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until the end of the turn, where X is the number of bobbleheads you control as you activate this ability. Activate only as a sorcery. So you can pump your team and go to combat with this guy and not worry about your creatures dying. So, or follow it up with a Wrath, maybe. Either is good. I love the bobbleheads. I think they're super flavorful, and they, hearken to basically the statistics system of Fallout, and I think are a great representation.
Yeah, overall, I think these are really cool. Just being more multicolor mana rocks that people are always looking for, but have an upside. So now it's like, not just, because most of them you kind of get, it makes a mana and maybe draws a card or whatever. Like, these have real abilities. Like, being able to give stuff indestructible and pump something is actually really cool. I mean, it kind of had to have the sorcery clause on it so it didn't get too crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a cool concept all around to implement these and get them into the game.
Yeah, I mean, I love these sort of, gathering up these things that are together and letting all their thing, it's very Sliver-esque in a way.
Yeah.
Intelligence bobblehead lets you draw X cards, which is the number of the bobbleheads, which I think is rad. And this one is certainly cool as well. And, somebody out there has to roll so hard that they have got not only the serialized versions, but all of their serialized versions are the same number. Somebody out there is going to do it. Like,
oh man!
All my guys are never.
They're going
or whatever. Yeah.
That would be crazy. That's
nuts.
A crazy thing.
I have seen Magic players do some insane things.
That's wild.
Yeah. All right. Power Dragon. What's number 7?
I went with a legendary guy here at Codsworth Handy Helper. It's 2 colorless and a white for a 2/3 legendary robot. Commanders you control have Ward 2, which already is going to make it popular because you can protect your commander. But it also taps for 2 white mana. But you can only spend that on aura and equipment spells. But then you can also tap it to move an aura equipment to a different creature, which is actually pretty sweet. It can only be done as a sorcery. This card, kind of what we're talking about with the other equipment earlier, like, these pieces are coming together more and more. And just being able to move an equipment around or an aura around to get a different effect or make something unblockable maybe, or give something untargetable, let it get in there, then you move it to something else. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff you could do with a card like this, and you get the upside of getting a 2/3 that happens to also produce 2 mana to do the things your deck already wants to do. Like, this has a lot of different versatility built into it on a decent sized creature.
This is, like, in terms, I think, of flavorfully, I think it's fantastic. It's a robot. It's supposed to help you. It's not supposed to win the game. It's supposed, it's supposed to be there to help you. He's helping you. So he's helping your commander stay alive. He's helping you make some mana. He's helping you move stuff around. But that's kind of like, that's what they do. And so there are these awesome sidekicks, essentially. And that's exactly what I want a sidekick to do, is all these weird little abilities that all work together with my deck and all make things happen. But they're never going to be the star of the deck, and they don't want to be.
Well, you could. This could just be your commander if you really wanted it to.
I guess so.
Yeah, I love this guy. I think it's very cool to just have like a mere squire commander. There's some really expensive equip costs out there. Things like Colossal Hammer, obviously, but there's also Argentum Armor, Black Blade Reforged. There's some big stuff out there. Then the fact that you can, pay X, this is also a mana rock, in addition to being a squire, is a huge deal. So this thing gives you so much for just a pretty low barrier for entry.
Yeah, 3 really good abilities on a 3 mana creature.
Yeah, and I appreciate that it is worded in a way that it would give itself Ward 2 if it's your commander. which is pretty rad. I think that's cool.
It's sad that you have to, if this weren't, much like the bobblehead, if this didn't have the activate only as a sorcery clause, this thing would be absurd. This thing would be like I block with my lion sash and then equip it to another creature so that it wouldn't die. Like that'd be crazy stuff that you could do with this card. You can already do a ton with this card, so it doesn't need that.
Right. You can do a whole bunch of things and stuff. And speaking of things and stuff, this next card I picked here for my number 7 was really cool. I don't know. It does a whole bunch of things. I appreciate the fact when you're able to just like clear it out. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of Commander players don't like that because it kind of resets the board in many ways. But you also have to like stop some people from going completely bananas. And so sometimes it takes a big, scary monster to do that. Sometimes it takes a bear mutant to do that. And rampaging Yao Guai, he's just coming to get you. And he's going to come and destroy all your crap. Because it's 3 green and X for a rare bear mutant. It's a 2/2 vigilance trample. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. And when it does, you destroy any number of target artifacts and or enchantments with total mana value X or less. So you just kind of pop through and do the thing and just kill everything. And because it's total mana value, all your treasures are gone. All your clues get out of there. All that food, bye-bye. Just get out. And that's all you need to do. And I really appreciate the value in this guy.
Yeah, I think that's the part people miss on this. Or cards even similar to it. People read it, go, oh, it's X or less. But there's a lot of things that count as 0. So you can sometimes get 6, 7, 10 things for just the low cost of like 5 mana. You know, that's going to get maybe a mana rock, a soul ring or whatever, and get rid of all those other trinkets sitting on the table. Like, this can have a really high upside depending on what you're playing against.
Yeah. For 3 mana, you get rid of all treasures, all clues, and all foods. For 4 mana, you also get rid of a soul ring. Like, and it goes uphill from there. Like, it's a good card.
Yep. I like what this card does, and I appreciate it. Let's move on here to number 6. Ruben, what's number 6?
My number 6 is a card that utilizes we have a bunch of ways to proliferate. We have a bunch of ways to get new counters on things. This is a card that utilizes a unique new and not brand new, but a pretty unique counter. And it's the first time that this counter has ever been on a land. I'm talking about Diamond City.
Ooh.
Diamond City taps for a generic and enters the battlefield with a shield counter on it, which means that if it would be dealt damage or destroyed, you remove a shield counter from it instead. It also has tap, move a shield counter from Diamond City onto target creature, activate only if 2 or more creatures enter the battlefield under your control this turn. That's pretty good. I think that is pretty easy to trigger. Getting 2 creatures onto the battlefield is fairly easy to trigger, or at a time, either by making tokens or just playing like a raise the alarm effect or activating a planeswalker maybe. So being able to activate the Diamond City is pretty easy. It's also a counter, so it can be proliferated. And it goes in any deck, pretty much any deck, because it's generic. So it can go in a colorless deck. It can go in your 5-color deck and everything in between.
Also randomly, it doesn't have to be activated as a sorcery. Now, you still need those things to come into play that turn, but could use it in the middle of combat for some type of combat trick to save a thing, depending on how your opponent blocks or whatever with the shield counter. So there's some cool little stuff you could do with this and get some surprise plays out of it.
Right, you can play is it Resolute Reinforcements? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and and bam, all of a sudden you're moving the counter around. I believe that 10, 15 years ago, this would have entered the battlefield tapped. Like, there's no way they would
100% for sure.
No way they would have given you the shield counter and the other thing and the third ability and not like are you crazy? But these days we're like, oh, of course. I mean, duh. But these days, yeah, you get to tap to add a colorless mana, the Wingding itself, and I love the idea of flashing in something and then just being clever. This is a card that lets you be clever, which I appreciate. Power Dragon, what's number 6?
My number 6 is an interesting card. I feel like we get variations of this every couple of years, but this is Wild Wasteland. 2 colorless and a red. It's an enchantment. You skip your draw step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you can play them until end of turn. This is just generally useful, right? Just getting access to extra cards every turn is never bad, right? And even in Commander, there's some situations where you're taking damage for drawing cards, and this allows you to skip your draw step. So you can just, all right, cool. I'll just exile some things and still get access to cards. Or something where you're trying to empty your hand and get some type of benefit there, like this fits those types of decks. And it's cheap. It's only 3 mana. This is really cool. And some of the cards we've seen recently like this kind of require you to either have your hand empty or discard your hand or whatever. Like, this is just bonus. Like, you can still have whatever you have. If you have other ways to draw cards, it's fine. This just gets you 2 extra cards, or 1 extra card during your turn by skipping your draw step.
Yeah. Back in my day, we called this Grafted Skullcap and we liked it. And I have played a lot of Grafted Skullcaps. So I'm super, recently we've had things that are super limiting but let you play more cards. This is not experimental frenzy, but it doesn't need to be. And this also doesn't prevent you from drawing cards if you have some sort of like Humble Defector or another way to draw cards in your red deck. So this is a great way to get twice as many cards as you otherwise would have. In a deck where you're probably not playing, if you're playing mono red, you're not playing instants anyway. So,
well, I will say one of the benefits here too is recent cards, stuff like Pia or Quintorius Khan or whatever, that care about you casting stuff from exile. This triggers all of those things as well.
Yeah, and the idea of skipping your draw step has happened 13 different times on Magic cards. Of course, we began with the OG Necropotence. But then also recycle. If you remember recycle.
Recycle and null, and it's recolor null profusion.
Null profusion is the other side of that, which is really cool.
Right. Wait, hold on. Symbiotic deployment is going to be in there.
Very nice. Very nice.
That's real bad.
I forgot about that.
That card's not good.
Card's bad. And just for those who are curious, and we'll move on here, but symbiotic deployment. Do you remember what it does? Remember the cost and what it does?
Skip your draw step. Pay a generic and tap 2 untapped creatures, draw a card.
That's right. What does it cost?
2 generic and a green.
Yes, that's right. Good job.
Yep.
Woohoo!
Woo, we did it.
Ruben got it.
That card is so... What set is that from? Like Odyssey?
Masks.
Yeah,
Masks?
Mercadian Masks had a lot
bad.
of cards like that were just really clunky.
God, that card's atrocious.
Mask.
Like, you get Wrathed and you're just out of the game.
Mask is what happens. Yeah, you're right. And mask is what happens when you play scared. You know what I mean? They talk about playing scared in football and other sports games. That's a whole set of playing scared. All right.
Recycle and Null Profusion are sweet, though. Those cards are awesome.
Those are fun. All right, moving on here to my number 6. This is a hell of a spell. Of all the spells, it's already got it worth $1 or $2. It's going to only go up. This card is ridiculous. For a green, a blue, and a generic mana, mutational advantage is a lot. It's a lot. It is a rare instant that says permanents you control with counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Prevent all damage that will be dealt to those permanents this turn, and then you proliferate.
Wow.
So you just get to do everything for 3 mana. Everything that has counters on it is great and fine. And of course, there's an easy way to put counters on everything these days. Not to mention just plus counters, but flying and shield and whatever else you're doing. You're proliferating all of them anyway, so you're giving everybody else rad counters. So while you're doing that, all of your stuff gets hexproof and indestructible, so they're not doing anything to it, and you're preventing all the damage anyway. It's just like, this card is bananas. Is it just me? This card seems nuts.
Yeah.
No, this one almost made my list. Like, it's cheap. It's an instant. You get to proliferate on top of saving your things that happen to already have counters on them. And it has really cool art that like really depicts kind of what's going on with the card. Like, this is all around awesome.
Yeah.
My good close personal friend Tannen Grace would used to tell a story about the deck that he XO'd day 1 of a Pro Tour and then missed day 2. Which was the Team Pro Tour Charleston, where he was playing a blue-green Simic Graft deck, and had a bunch of random +1/+1 counter garbage, and then would turn his opponent's creatures into 0/0s with some of the trickery that you could do with that deck. This card would be perfect in those decks. You want to have just all of the Simic Initiates and all of the Biomass mutations in a deck together. This is the card for you.
Yeah, it's a hell of a Magic card in the blue-green world, which wants to do all that stuff. So let's move on here halfway through to number 5. Ruben, what's number 5?
My number 5 starts with 2 terrifying words. Return all. That's a lot. We're home run in territory already. When you say return all, we're already in Evacuation. We're already in Rise of the Dark Realms, right? Like, we're already doing a lot. Open the vaults at our worst. I think that, we're doing, Second Sunrise. Cyclonic Rift. Yeah, Upheaval. Return All is a terrifying 2-word phrase. And this card does indeed cost 7 mana and very likely wins you the game when you cast it. And it is called Wake the Past. For 5 generic red-white, you get a sorcery that says return all artifact cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. They gain haste until the end of the turn. That is terrifying. Mm-hmm. There are a number of scary things. You can just mill yourself for 80 cards, put your Mere Battlespheres onto the board, put your creatures on, like all your creatures onto the board, and go to town.
Yeah, for 7 mana, like, I'm okay with that, right? I always feel like once we get to the 7, 8, 9 mana, let's do something dumb, right?
Yeah.
Like, if my opponent hasn't, if we haven't removed your graveyard, we haven't killed enough things, we haven't put you close to dead, that's fine. Why not? But, yeah, if you build it, like we're saying, some of the cards we even talked about already here, if you're playing those types of decks with all those artifacts and equipment and whatever, this is cool.
I think maybe way back in the day, I think it was 9 mana or so, or even 10 mana, like with Omniscience, right? And then you kept going, and you had 8 mana for Craterhoof. And these days, I think it's around 7, because this is the big dinosaurs down from LCI and so on, the big spells and whatnot from the 7 mana mill 10 and do all that stuff. Like the idea that essentially 7 mana is you can just do almost anything is kind of where we're at. And I think, and the difference between 6 and 7 is so huge. It's like the difference between 1 and 2. Like, they're just miles apart as to the best removal spell at 1 mana versus the best removal spell at 2 mana. You know what I'm saying? So the best thing you can do at 7 is getting higher and higher in terms of what you're able to accomplish. And this is a good example of that.
The other thing about this at 7 and things that are like, wait until your graveyard gets big enough in order for it to matter is you don't need to ramp into this. You just actually wait till turn 7 and you wait for stuff to die. You don't want to ramp onto this on turn 4.
Right.
This is not a card you go explosive veggies and then try to play this as fast as possible. Yeah. This is a card where you're casting on turn 10 and waiting for 30 cards to be in your graveyard.
Yeah, they're like giving you rad counters, and you're like, "Oh no, please no!"
Yeah, exactly.
Oh God, guys, seriously, Yeah, sure. This card's great. Let's move into number 5 for Power Dragon. What you got?
I believe my number 5 is higher on somebody else's list, so
Whoa.
I'm gonna sit this one out for a second.
Well, I got a number 5. I got all the way through number 1. I got everything. Wow, and so for my number 5 here, let me tell you, this card is dope. I just like cool, dope designs. This is another one that's fairly simple and straightforward in that way, but I also really appreciate it. I'm like, how do you take the Vault Tech assisted targeting system and turn it into a Magic card? Well, you get VATS. That's what that stands for. For 2 black and 2 generic mana, it's a rare instant with Split Second, which is another awesome flavor. It's just going to happen. It's just going to happen, and they're just going to die. So Split Second cannot be responded to with activated abilities or spells. Choose any number of target creatures with equal toughness. Destroy the chosen creatures. Just yep, and got them, and they're done now, and that's it.
That's really cool. I'm sure there's great flavor here, and I don't know what it is, but that's really cool. It can wipe out an infinite number of Scute Swarms. It can get rid of a bazillion Sand Warrior tokens out of your opponent's Hazazon deck, or it can get rid of 1 big giant idiot if you really want it to.
Just kill that thing. That's okay.
Yeah, I think the restriction of having to be similar toughness is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Like, are you waiting because maybe they're playing a +1/+1 counter deck, so you're like, well, they'll make these other 2 bigger next turn, so let me just wait so I can get 3 creatures instead of 2 creatures, or whatever the case is, right? Like, I like the flexibility of this card. It's quirky, and it's weirdly both restrictive and non-restrictive in how it works. Like, I kind of like that. It's a weird design, but I'm into it.
Very nice. All right, so let's move on here to number 4. Power Dragon, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is, I think, the only reprint that actually made my list, and it's Nesting Grounds. It's a land that taps for a colorless. You can pay 1, tap it, and move a counter from one target permanent you control to another. Activate as a sorcery. The big reason I like this card is particularly because of things like the +1/+1 counters deck. A lot of times it's when a card gets a +1/+1 counter, 2 or 3 extra counters get made or something triggers or whatever. Like, those types of decks love this type of card. Like, being able to move 1 counter over and now maybe it gets a +4/+4 and something else triggers. Or maybe, like we were talking about earlier, you need to set up something and move a shield counter around maybe. Or give something else menace or flying. Like, this is a pretty cool little versatile card if you're playing a deck that already cares about different types of counters being on stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This card's great.
Yeah, this card's super rad. Like, this card's already worth like $7 or so from New Capenna and Commander 2020. Like, right now it's selling for like 80 cents and $1. Get some of these. Whenever you see a land that does super cool and it's completely colorless, it's always going to be useful. Whether it's useful to trade later or to sell later or just to use in every one of your decks. Every deck that has counters in it, which is like every deck now, wants to move them around. And that's cool. I think that's amazing. That's why this thing is $7+ for older versions. Get you some while they're cheap.
Low cost of being put into your mana base too,
Yeah. Oh no.
+1/+1 counters are the most common, obviously, but we can move loyalty around. We can move infect around,
flying counters, whatever you got. Finality counters, for example.
Ooh, finality counters are nice.
Just saying, everything.
And
moves.
dude, I have to tell you, I was surprised to see that these were under $1. I was like, this should be $2 or $3 probably all the time.
Oh yeah, this will ramp up quickly. You won't find these
not going to stay there.
All right, Ruben, what's number 4?
So I have 3 total hires on my list. One was at number 8, and we're still waiting for that one. My number 4 and my number 3 are both my final hires.
Ooh.
Well, that just lets me talk about my number 4 and my number 3, and that's what we'll do. So
there you go.
For my number 4, it was tough for me not to choose a lot of kind of removal stuff because I think Fallout is great at illustrating removal, and I think they did a great job at thematically with game design options and game design things showing that type of like decay, right, with the rad counters and the -X and -X and all this other stuff. And so again, this is wonderful simplicity, already a $4 to $5 card, worth a whole lot more if you get the extra nice versions. But Nuclear Fallout is just super cool. It's 2 black and X for rare sorcery. Each creature gets twice -X until end of turn. Each player gets X rad counters. So it's doing all that you want. It's going to sweep the whole board. Everyone's going to start milling like crazy anyway. I just love everything about this card.
Yeah, this is cool. Just having a big X spell effect like this, obviously going to be able to wipe out the board for probably 5 or 6 mana in a lot of cases. But getting the rad counters on top of it is just kind of extra bonus if your deck's already focused on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love the black X removal spells. I was a proponent of Black Sun Zenith in the cube. Bring it back, Wizards. Black Sun Zenith. It's time to. Let's play like it's, I don't know, 2009.
Man, even back then, it didn't take long for it.
It was questionable back then too. It was not great. But I love this effect. I think that the variability of it, particularly in our new commander-centric world, you have so many ways to mess with graveyards and want to get different numbers on X here. I think it's a great card.
Yeah, this card is super cool. Let's move on here to number 3. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and take my number 3 and run with it because I think this card is so cool. This card was one of those, like, I was reading through it and I was like, wow, it's got pretty high ratings on EDH rank and like the value is there. And is it just like a weird looking deer? And like, oh no, the Watchful Radstag is coming to get you. It is a green and 2 generic mana 2/2. Just a 3 mana 2/2. Rare elk mutant. What could go wrong? Well, it has evolve. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than Watchful Radstag, you put a +1 counter on Watchful Radstag. And whenever Watchful Radstag evolves, you create a token that's a copy of it. That's amazing. I love it. This stuff's going to go nuts, man. You're going to go crazy with this card. This card's going to go nuts, and that's what I love about it.
Dude, this was my number 9 or number 8. No, I'm wrong. This was my number 5. We still haven't gotten to my number 8.
Oh my goodness, number 5.
This was my number 5. And honestly, I like this because you can get multiple copies in a turn.
Yep.
Like, that's a thing that can happen. Each of those are going to be getting +1/+1 counters, so it helps that out. If you just want something that cares about token creatures coming into play, like this does that, and it's only 3 mana. Like it fits a lot of different
This
decks.
card's
Like
so cool.
this card is just neat. Even on its own, it slowly just adds a pile of value over like 2 turns, and then it just piles up. Like this is really, really cool.
Yeah, there's a bunch of decks that care about this. I mean, anything that doubles exponentially is going to be playable, right? So this goes from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8. And you're able to do that with this card. If you're left unmolested, you're going to have a herd the size of, the biggest goblin army that you've ever seen.
Yeah, this is, it's like it's already $3 or so a copy. And I feel like part of that reason is you want to buy extra copies so that you can literally have copies.
Use them as tokens?
Yeah,
The pack rat problem?
Yeah,
I
okay.
had that same thought of getting some just to use as actual tokens. For
That's cute. I like that.
Put them in a different color sleeve, right? But then all the...
Sure.
I think that's so cool. I love
great.
the hell out of this creature. It's so neat.
The only reason I believe it or not, I think the price is so low because I don't think people have processed the idea of like the token still has the other copy ability.
Right.
So it's not like, I get a 2/2. It's like, no, you get another thing that's going to make another thing.
That's going to
and then those things are going to make another thing.
And then everything, and it's so cool. And I love that. That's brilliant. Power Dragon, what's number 3?
My number 3. This was one I debated on how high I was going to put it on the list because I think this has potential to become a commander staple. And it's Silver Shroud Costume. It's 2 colorless. It's an equipment. It has flash. When it enters the battlefield, you just attach it to a creature. That creature gains Shroud, so nothing can target it. And the creature also can't be blocked. It does have an equip cost of 3, but that's kind of after the fact, all things considered. Like, the crazy thing about this is, like, it just outright protects a creature. It just basically gives it hexproof, by giving it Shroud.
Right.
But then it just, on future turns, can't even be blocked. So if you have anything that cares about hitting the opponent and triggering, or something that maybe gets an effect when it attacks, like, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Like, it's cheap. It only costs 2, and it has flash. I don't really know why it needed all of that, but it has it, and I don't think this card is going to stay very cheap for very long.
It's not even real cheap now. It's already like $3-something, almost $4, and it's an uncommon, technically.
Yeah, I think has potential to go much higher than that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is the same total cost as a Whisper Silk cloak, but it's also a counterspell to removal. And I've seen lots of Whisper Silk cloaks in Commander, so this is a home run. Definitely get your 2 to 3 copies that you're going to want for your Commander decks ASAP.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, what we're speaking of, if it's a colorless card, can go into any Commander deck whatsoever, is useful in a variety of them. You don't have to be playing like this certain style. Like you're playing creatures, you're probably going to want a Silver Shroud costume because you like your creatures to live, and now you can say no for 2 mana. You have your own counter spell in colors that would never have them, and yada yada. And I think that's brilliant. All right, let's move up here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2 is a card that the competitive Commander players are going to love, that might have a chance to sneak into Legacy or Vintage as well. But certainly competitive Commander, this is a legend that you're going to want to build around. Because there's an entire class of much maligned types of cards, particularly in blue, that turn your artifacts into creatures with like a medium level of power for a while. And, they're pretty bad. Most of them are pretty bad. I mean, and Soul Artifact was good for like a second, but your relics roars. You know what I'm talking about? Your Zoetic Glyphs. Like they're not tearing up Legacy games. They're not tearing up Standard. But in competitive Commander, if you're targeting Curie Emergent Intelligence, boy howdy, are you going to town. Curie Emergent Intelligence is a generic and a blue for a 1/3 legendary artifact creature robot that has 2 sentences on it. Whenever Curie Emergent Intelligence deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its power.
Rad.
Hell yeah, buddy.
Very rad.
Go to town. And pay a generic and a blue and exile another non-token artifact you control. Curie becomes a copy of the exiled creature, except it has quote, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its base power. Which brings us to the other card that Curie goes with, which is Phyrexian Dreadnought. So if you're interested in attacking for a 12/12 with trample that draws 12 cards, boy, do I have the card for you.
Yeah, you do have to exile another non-token artifact creature, but that is a 12/12 creature, and this card seems really dope, and I like it, and it's clearly right now very affordable and under the radar, and just the type of thing that will go absolutely nuts when your opponent least expects it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with this card. Like, just getting able to draw stuff, having a sacrifice effect if you want that for things. Well, technically it's an exile effect. I guess it doesn't really sacrifice. But it's actually just really surprising and versatile that you look at something for 2 mana and go, okay, it's a 1/3, and maybe I give up a card when you hit me. But you almost want to block this once you start seeing other stuff on the battlefield, right? Like, oh, look, there's like a 3 mana rock sitting over there that you don't need anymore. It's like, well, crap, now I kind of need to block this thing, but I'm also going to give up something. Like, it's going to be super annoying to stare at this across the table, but good design all around.
All you got to do is drop a hundo on a Phyrexian Dreadnought, and you're good to go.
Or pick up the Draft Chaff Resculpts and Relics Roars from your local store and be content with drawing 4 cards. Like, it'll be okay. You can draw 4 cards.
4 cards is still fun. Power Dragon, what's number 2?
My number 2 is a card I just can't get enough of out of this set, and it's Well Rested. Colorless and a green, it's an aura, enchant a creature. When this creature becomes untapped, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, you gain 2 life, and you draw a card. It only triggers once each turn. Like, this is just value on value on value for 2 mana. And it can go on any creature, likely something you're already tapping every turn anyway, whether it's to draw a card or make mana or whatever the case may be. And you just get all that extra value. You're getting a card every turn, you're getting life, and you're getting 2 +1/+1 counters. Eventually, it's just going to be big enough to fight with. But again, if you care about a deck that wants +1/+1 counters, that's some bonus. If you have something that cares about drawing or gaining life, like, that's a thing. And it's only 2 mana. This is actually a sweet card in every way.
Yeah.
Anything that makes Twiddle sweet, I'm down for. I'm down. Like, I'm down.
Yeah. This was my number 8.
Nice.
I definitely love this card. If I recall correctly, there's also another, I don't remember the name of it, but there's a Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, the commander that cares about having +1/+1 counters, an aura, and an equipment all at the same time. And Well Rested gives you 2 of those 3 by itself. And, it goes great on mana dorks, goes great on guys that want in the red zone. I think this card is equally as fantastic, perhaps not equally as fantastic as Power Dragon since he put it at his number 2, but just an amazing card that I think has a home in a lot of different decks.
Yeah, very nice. I think this card is super rad. I left it off my list partially because I knew you guys probably would have it on there. Sure. And, blue-green, particularly decks, they're tapping. They're untapping.
True.
They're tapping on your turn. They're tapping on the other person's turn. They're tapping every single turn.
Oh, man.
Drawing cards.
This with the Seedborn Muse?
Bruh. Oh. You can live dreams. This card lets you live dreams, and that's what's important about it, and that's why we like it. All right, so for my number 2 here, you talk about living a dream. You talk about going crazy. Look, man, I just want, if I'm going to get involved in the game of Commander, I need chaos. I need the Joker to show up. I need Two-Face to flip coins. I need a mysterious stranger to appear and do just nutty things that came out of nowhere. For 2 red, 2 generic mana, Mysterious Stranger is a rare human rogue with flash. It's a 3/2 for 4 mana. When it enters the battlefield, for each graveyard with an instant or sorcery card in it, exile target instant or sorcery card from that graveyard. If 2 or more cards are exiled this way, choose one of them at random and copy it. You may cast a copy without paying its mana cost. We're flipping tables. We're going nuts. We're jumping off the balcony into the pool. Woo! You gotta go bananas. A Mysterious Stranger feels like a card that will let you go absolutely bananas, and I love it.
Yeah, it's such a weird card for me. Like, 4 mana, 3/2 flash, and then we're just going to randomly get something out of people's yards. Like, We'll see what we get. We're just going to fire off a bomb, right? Or I'm going to get, like, a card.
A Raven Growth. Okay, no thanks.
So there's a couple of weird things going on with this card. Obviously, there's a ton of weird stuff happening. One is, this is actually Graveyard Hate Sort of.
Kinda.
This is like medium level graveyard hate. Like there are enough torrential gear hulks in the format where Mysterious Stranger is going to be a counterspell by itself a non-zero percentage of the time. Then we can also mitigate our variance with graveyard removal with Bojuka Bogs and, Soul Guide Lanterns and whatnot. Because this only cares about graveyards that have instants and sorceries in it. It's also got some of that Direfleet Daredevil energy of being able to cast a thing of your opponent's. And it has flash. So it's this weird amalgam of hate and Snapcaster Mage and stealing from your opponent. And it's a 3/2 for 4. That's nothing to sneeze at. And you can just leave your mana up to be able to respond to stuff that your opponents are doing.
The card's rad.
And it happens to be a human and a rogue, and that does matter for some different deck types.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's all coming together. All right. So we have still 3 spots. Ruben's number 4, number 3. Power Dragon's number 8 that we have not covered yet. So we're about to cover all the goodies right here with our number 1.
Listen, I think that just means that my list is the best because I have all of the number 1s on my list.
You do seem to have them
I guess
on
you
there.
do.
Ruben, what's your number 1?
Well, my number 1 of all of the cards, I think you kind of had to go with the name of the album. You know what I mean? You had to go with the card that is the most iconic, and it would help if that card also had implications in every format in which it was legal, and that's going to be the Pip-Boy 3000.
Ooh.
Pip-Boy 3000 is a 1 generic mana artifact equipment, and whenever the creature attacks, you choose one. You can sort your inventory, which means that you draw a card and then discard a card. You can pick a perk, which puts a +1/+1 counter on the creature, or you can check the map, which untaps up to 2 target lands, all for the low equip cost of 2 generic mana. There is so much going on with this card. You have so much variability, you have so many options, and it goes in a variety of different decks. It is, of course, in the artifact equipment-centric red-white deck of the most recent of the Fallout decks, but goes in, any deck that cares about equipment. It goes in any deck that wants some extra mana, maybe. It's got so much going for it, and it's at such a low cost that I had to put it at the number 1.
This is one of the times I feel like this card might also carry some extra value just for fandom purposes,
yes.
Right? Like if you're playing anything with Fallout Boy and you're a fan and, you're picking up a deck and this isn't in one of them, you're definitely going to want this card, right? Like it's just really cool, and it happens to be good for almost every deck can use it. Honestly, I was going to name different deck types, but almost everybody wants one of these abilities somewhere along the way. So like this is just a cool all-around card.
Yeah, and if you're playing stuff as instants or things with flash to untap 2 lands with it, it's huge. It's already over $7. I mean, like,
wow,
this is a recurring theme. As we said, if it's a colorless card that can go in any commander deck that has universal value to do things that are universally good in Magic, here you go. Like, it's also a card that's going to be very, very difficult to reprint. This is the type of card that forces a universes within masters thing that we talked about, which again I think is way too early, but in 5 years we're really going to start talking about how, hey, Pip-Boy's like $30 or something stupid. We really need to reprint this card. Please God help us reprint this card.
I think that might only be 3 years away.
You never know. I'm telling you, people don't know when they start naming stuff really weird, specific stuff like this. That can create more problems than the feel-good flavor it provides, as it were. So
the One Ring, this is not. But not every set is going to have the one.
Oh, sure.
This is true. Power Dragon, what's number 1?
My number 1 is very flavorful for this set, but Nuka-Cola Vending Machine. It's 3 colorless. It's an artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it, create a food. But whenever you sacrifice a food, you create a tapped treasure token, which is pretty damn sweet. It's not quite making your food cheaper because the treasure comes in tapped. But being able to turn food tokens into treasure, one, is just really cool thematically, right? Like you put the money in and you get the little thing, and like that's all cool. Like, but yeah, this is just a cool card all around. Being able to produce food for just 1 mana, like so many things want you to sacrifice artifacts or gain life or whatever. This fits all that. And then on the bonus side, you just get treasure for stuff for later. or to just keep fueling your vending machine. So yeah, this is just a cool card that I think is going to find its way into a lot of different decks.
Raven, what number is this for you?
Oh, this was my number 3.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a value engine. This is what I was saying earlier. This is just a sentence that does stuff without you having to do anything. Whenever you sacrifice a food, you just get another thing. Like, I don't care what else is going on this card, really. Making a food token for a generic and tapping it is cool. But this card goes infinite fairly easily with cards like Peregrine Took, and a bunch of the Lord of the Rings food stuff probably goes crazy with Nuka-Cola. Not to mention Academy Manufacturer. When you make a food, you just make 3 more things.
Oh my God.
You know, there's a bunch of stuff going on with Nuka-Cola vending machine where you can accidentally go infinite, or at least go accidentally arbitrarily large. And all for just a small, pretty simple package.
This card is already $13.50. It is not slowing down. This is a card that just gets real dumb because, again, that second ability, you don't have to do anything for it. This card doesn't make that ability to do anything. It's not tap this until end of turn. It's not pay mana until end of whatever. It's not when you do this, pay a thing. No. It's just whenever, for any reason whatsoever, you sacrifice a food to an ability, to itself, whatever, you just get a tap treasure token. You just replace it for free. And that's ridiculous.
What's the worst that happens? Like, I don't have anything to do during your end step. I'm going to pay 1, make a food, crack it, gain 3 life, get a treasure.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, just do that every turn.
That's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's crazy because it doesn't make tapped food tokens either.
Nope.
It just makes food that you can use immediately. God almighty. All right, cool. So, with the ability to narrow it down of all these lists, my number 1 is Power Dragon's number 8. And Ruben's number 4.
It's the right card. It's to be at the end of the episode.
It's the right one. You know, it's the one we needed to be. Okay, look, I can't. We already talked about it. My number 10 started with few words, right?
Exactly.
It's beautiful. You can't. I don't know how many cards, literally how many cards you could possibly design with 2 words. But by God, they did it with Rad Storm. It says Storm. Proliferate, and that's all it does. And on the normal ones, obviously it spells it out, but no, on the good ones, the sweet special versions, it just says Storm Proliferate. It's like a painting. It's like a poem. It's beautiful. For 1 blue and 3 generic mana, it's a rare instant. It's an instant. Storm Proliferate. Oh, your opponent's doing blah 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 blah, doing a whole bunch of crap, playing a whole bunch of spells, and they're done now. Okay, end of your turn. Brrr. Like, this card is so sick. This card is already $4 to $5+. The Fallout extended version is like $50+. It's so sick. It just a Storm. It's a Proliferate, and I can't.
Yeah, this feels like something they're trying to do more often because I think we just did it in Doctor Who as well. There was a card that was just 2 words. You know,
it's hard, man.
And this is like fun space for them to play around with. Like, what 2 words can we push something with that aren't insane, but that people really want to play with? Right, and this is one of those cards. Having Storm and Proliferate obviously has a lot of upside, and the right decks could be the thing that sets something off, right? Juice up some things on the battlefield and make 3-4 copies of a thing. Like, could be enough to end the game in the right situations. It's like, this is really cool. Yeah. Or just proliferate a bunch, right? Like, your opponents have played a couple things trying to kill off each other's stuff, and you're like, great, I'm just going to play this. I'm going to proliferate, like, 4 times or 5 times, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great value card. You just play it on an opponent's turn for 3. Like, who cares, you know? But I've got 3 permanents on the board. I've got, like, an Everflowing Chalice, I've got a Planeswalker, and I've got some +1/+1 counter creature. Like, who cares? But now, all of those have additional counters. That Everflowing Chalice taps for 4 now, that creature's 3 bigger, that Planeswalker might be able to lethal or ultimate. Like, even just as a value card, it's fine. It's perfectly reasonable. Then you get into moments of craziness where if you're comboing with this card or you're, you know, able to play this on a counterspell battle, you're going absolutely bananas bonkers. It still needs some amount of setup. It still needs some amount of board presence, or it needs your opponent to have 1 infect counter on them or 1 rad counter on them. But you're able to go completely insane with this card. And I love that it requires that very minimal investment. It's pretty minimal, the investment
minimal.
that you need to make Radstorm absolutely wonderful.
Now, if my calculations are correct here, in Doctor Who, Dalek Squadron had 2 words on it, Myriad and Menace. And Into the Time Vortex had Cascade and Rebound.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
That one was also fantastic. So again,
well, there was also the Time Travel Storm that, while it did not have, I think it was like Everything Everywhere All at Once. I forget exactly what the card was called. But it had 2 keyword abilities. It didn't have any other words beyond those.
Well, there you go. And I mean, that was Cascade Storm or Cascade Rebound, same thing.
Yep,
but
Cascade Rebound as well.
Right, and I think that's brilliant. And there's only so many of those cards that they're going to be able to make anyway. And I love it, what it does for the set, the theme, how it comes across. It's just wonderful, and I love it. And I think they did a really good job with Fallout. It's a very cool set, very interesting stuff. Yep. And that was our top 10 Fallout cards. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Power Dragon's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to highlight it on our next top 10 show. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Power Dragon.
Hey, it was fun. There's a lot of cards I need to go add to some want lists now.
Thank you, Ruben.
This was a lot more. I mean, I'm not the biggest Fallout fan. I have a passing familiarity with the art, with the games and the show that's coming up soon. But the set makes me excited for that because I'll certainly watch the shows. The world seems rife and full. The cards are full of flavor and very well designed with love, it seems, as is the response from the Fallout fandom.
Yeah, as of this recording, the Fallout show has not released, but the trailers are out and they look really good. And I got high hopes. So let's see how it goes. And move on here to our outro final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com. Use the promo code MagicMikes on CoolStuffInc.com to save 5%. Our co-sponsor, ManaTraders.com. My co-host, Power Dragon and Ruben Wrestler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Please follow, Please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Or you can tweet. Don't do that. Catch us online at twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, or on TikTok at Magic Mikes Cast. Our Magic Mikes subreddit and like the Magic Mikes page on them Facebooks. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for some more Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.